President Pranab Mukherjee's first address to the joint session of Parliament had Narendra Modi's stamp all over it. From the fight against food inflation to modernizing the railways, from water and waste management to manufacturing and job creation, the President's speech spelt out the economic and political priorities of the government for the next 5 years. To discuss the Modi government's agenda, I'm now joined by Siddharth Birla, the President of FICCI, Sunil Jain, Managing Editor of the Financial Express, former Finance Secretary S. Narayan, Shubhra Rao, Chief Economist at Yes Bank, and Dr. Bindeshwar Pathak, the founder of Sulabh Sanitation Movement, and Vikas Khemani, the CEO of Edelweiss Securities. Appreciate all of you joining me here on the show. Siddharth Birla, let me start by asking you, because, this was a speech that, as I pointed out, had Narendra Modi's stamp all over it. The messaging from the government as far as the reform agenda is concerned has been consistent both in its direction as well as in terms of specific initiatives. If I were to ask you to highlight for me your single biggest takeaway, besides the fact that you had Pranab Mukherjee ironically talking about a non-adversarial tax regime, what would the highlight be?
I think you've correctly identified. I mean, it is directional and aspirational at this point of time, without too many details. But I think the single takeaway I had is that development is not for, the benefit of, say, 5 lakh people doing much better than they have before. But how do we lift all the millions in our country upwards? And that is the only way to build a constituency for development. And development has to be aimed at improving incomes and standard of life of the people. And I think that is the central message that I got from this speech.
Okay, Shubhra Rao, let me come to you and ask you about your key takeaway. A significant amount of time was actually spent on prioritizing the government's fight against food inflation, reiterating the government's commitment to reforming the PDS system, to reforming the FCI, to amending the APMC Act, and so on and so forth. How would you read what we heard from the President today as far as the fight against food inflation is concerned, especially in the context of a situation when we are likely to see a very poor monsoon, as we've just heard from the government today?
That's right, Shereen. I think the quite immediate risks for the government facing at this point in time is the risk of El Nino and its likely impact on agriculture and therefore the food prices. So up front, we've had the legacy of inflation remaining high over the last 3 years, and clearly that has been the mainstay for all the policy making which will begin to address these concerns up front. First, food inflation. It's not just the problem of lower agriculture output or a monsoon performance, but equally important has been the problem of adequate distribution mechanism and efficient distribution mechanism. So quite rightly, I think the government is paying equal attention to the distributive mechanism, particularly related to agriculture output. Food inflation has its risks on broad generalized inflation. Monetary policy therefore remains non-accommodative, which in turn would have some kind of limitations to reviving growth. So I think at the heart of the problem would be how are we tackling basically the food inflation issue. There could be rejigging of PDS. More importantly, I think review of minimum support prices, bringing in efficiency through dismantling APMC. I think more importantly in the near term would be if in case indeed there is hoarding and so on because of scarcity of food, how is the government going to crack down on those?
Do you anticipate any pullback as far as the Food Security Act is concerned? And I ask you this in the context of the BJP manifesto, which had very clearly articulated the need for consultation with state governments and a review of the Food Security Act, which has been reiterated today by the Finance Minister after his meeting with state finance ministers. I'm quoting Mr. Jaitley. He says, while there is a National Food Security Act, the need of the hour is to implement the law in a cost-effective and efficient manner for ensuring real food security. What would you take this to be a signal at?
I think, basically the message is that it could be reviewed, the food security could be reviewed. The ultimate bottom line is that the poor strata of people should get affordable and adequate food supplies. Now, if that is going to be achieved by reviewing how the food distribution actually takes place, it could be through plethora of welfare programs which are outlined through the budget mechanism, as also through various programs, basically bring all those programs under one umbrella. Effective monitoring, better execution can be also yielding similar results to that of food security bill. So I think, while we do not know exactly how they're going to review the exact food security bill per se, but in a way they could tackle the problem of inadequate and unaffordable food supplies to the poor through better managing the system which currently exists. So I think there is room, particularly
let me interrupt you, Shilpa. I'll come back to you in just a second, but let me go across to S. Narayan and Sunil Jain on this very same point. Mr. Narayan, let me start by asking you, as far as how much room do you think the government has to maneuver as far as the Food Security Act is concerned, because it's been passed by Parliament? How would you read the statement coming in from the Finance Minister? Let me start by asking you, and then I'll get Sunil in.
I think an important point that we must recognize that there are several states, most notably Tamil Nadu, I am in Chennai now, where the PDS system has been working extremely well, and that is before the Food Security Act. And you have models not just in Tamil Nadu, you have models in 5 or 6 states where with the state as well as the central support, food is being delivered, at least cereals are being delivered at substantially below the market prices. Tamil Nadu, it's given away free. And therefore, bringing models like this into operation in other states would definitely enable the existing Food Security Act to work. And this is possible. It is possible because in Tamil Nadu it's been working for 32 years. In Maharashtra it's working. So many states it's working. So you just need to concentrate on the states where it's not working and to make sure it works. So I don't think we need to rush to the conclusion that you're going to dilute the Food Security Act, but perhaps we are going to look at a situation where distribution is made more efficient, more cost effective, and more, I would say, more pro-poor. That's possible.
Okay, Sunil, would you agree with that assessment that perhaps it's too premature to see a dilution? We could perhaps see more efficiency being pushed forward as far as distribution is concerned.
Actually, that's what I'm worried about. When I read the president's speech, and when you read the BJP's manifesto, the president's speech is actually sort of a reiteration of what is there in the manifesto. When you read the president's speech, you don't get the impression that the government is actually going to be cutting any of the UPA's bad schemes. You get the feeling the government is going to try and, quote unquote, fix them. So I think in the case of the PDS, which Dr. Narayan has been referring to, the fact of the matter is that FCI is procuring double or triple the amount that it needs to have. So you're wasting 60,000 crore rupees there. At a time when the government needs that money desperately, more so now, since you're going to have a subnormal monsoon. I would have expected that in the president's speech, or perhaps we're being hasty, perhaps this needs to be done in the budget, certainly it needs to be done in the budget. We need to have a proper roadmap which says, we spend 2.5% of our GDP on subsidies right now. I am going to cut this down to 1.5% over 2 years.
But isn't that the indication that... But Sunil, let me ask you this. Isn't that the indication that you're getting from what the finance minister is saying? I mean, whether it's publicly or privately, the finance minister continues to maintain that fiscal consolidation is the priority for this government.
Absolutely, that is what, but every finance minister has said the same thing. I mean, which finance minister has told you the fiscal consolidation is not a priority?
Fair point.
It's not that I don't believe the finance. It's not that I don't believe the finance minister. The point I'm making is that by the time the budget comes, which is a few weeks from now, we need to have a lot more clarity. Are we going to go with subsidies the way they are, or are we going to cut them? Are we going to have FCI the way it is, or are we going to cut it? Right now what we are getting is broad statements of intent, which actually don't mean much. Let me give you an example which Mr. Birla will relate to very well. Is the government actually going to roll back the retrospective tax or not? I suspect not, because from whatever I'm hearing so far, they're worried about the CNBC.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that, Sunil, and I put Mr. Birla in the corner and I asked him to put his money on whether he actually sees a U-turn on the Retrospective Act or he just believes that the government is going to try and rein in the tax officer. He didn't even want to go as far as to say rein in. He said rein in is not the appropriate word. But Mr. Birla, comment on what Sunil is saying. Both Sunil and I don't believe that we are going to see the government do a U-turn in the budget, at least this budget as far as the retrospective tax is concerned, despite the fact that you had Pranab Mukherjee saying that this government is committed to a non-adversarial tax regime.
Okay, so you put me in a corner, so I have to fight back. Let me break up the retrospective in two aspects again. What is the scenario going to be going forward? So I think there is no choice for India, and I think it is correct for India to be very, very clear at what will be the policies going forward. Now, once that part is cleared, I don't call it a U-turn. I just say it is a statement of policy going forward. Now we are left with the 2030 problems that we've created in the past few years. Now there, I think the government will have to take a serious call as to how they are going to deal with it legislatively, because these matters have become very, very involved. But whatever the outcome, I believe that, we read in the media the arbitration and third-party proceedings have been started. Whatever the outcome on the old matters, I believe the government should show a firm modicum of control and find the solution itself, whatever be the solution. But I think India needs absolute clarity going forward. That doesn't mean a U-turn. That means a very clear statement of intent for the way forward.
Oh, absolutely. There's no two ways about that. But S. Narayan and Shubhada Rao, let me come back to you and ask you, Mr. Narayan, let me start by asking you, as Sunil pointed out, no finance minister says that he wants to follow the path of fiscal profligacy. Everybody talks about fiscal consolidation. Given the fact that this government has made its intent very clear, spending on infrastructure, they have said that they want to revive growth. Perhaps they will need to spend on infrastructure in order to be able to do that. Do you believe that 4.1% fiscal deficit number is going to be sacrosanct? Do you envisage slippages?
I do think that fiscal consolidation is possible. It's not easy. It's going to be possible. And it's going to be possible, I would think, by three things. One, they are talking about greater revenue mobilization, getting rid of the old tax cases and trying to mop up wherever revenue is possible. So I do think that a tax GDP ratio of 9.88, 10% is totally unacceptable. And if that goes up even by 0.5%, which it was even 10 years ago, and I think you're going to get a lot of money. So that's one way of fiscal consolidation. On the subsidies, I think there is room, as I was just mentioning earlier, there is room in the food subsidy bill. The room in the food subsidy bill is to push some of the efficiency or inefficiencies back to the states and ask them to be more efficient. If you look at state finances are very healthy. The RBI report says state finances are healthy. There is room in the state finances to take on a little more burden. So certainly it is possible to push that down to the states to make them perform better. And all that needs to be done is to make sure that the minimum support price is not hiked anymore, and there's a limit to the FCI procurement, and that will take care of that. That will leave only fertilizer and
so
fuel subsidy.
So you believe 4.1 is doable?
Fuel subsidy, yeah, absolutely. I think it's doable.
Shubhada, would you agree with that? There is an emphasis on non-tax revenue mobilization, the 8ZL, Hindustan Zinc, Balco, stake sale, residual stake sale, etc. We've already seen the government move towards appointing valuers. Do you believe 4.1 will stay, or do you believe that we could perhaps see some slippage?
No, I think 4.1 is quite achievable, because as Mr. Narayan was also saying, that the effort is going to be both on revenue as well as expenditure side. On revenue, the non-tax revenue will be, emphasized more in the current scenario where growth is still likely, going to take time to get back to 6.5–7%. So tax GDP ratio will have to wait for a couple of years till it becomes respectable. But till such time, you have to depend on other avenues revenues like non-tax revenue. You have extraordinary incomes through, PSU disinvestments we just spoke about, but even other spectrum auctions or whatever. So I think on revenue side, a broadening of tax base is going to be thrust no matter what.
Right.
On expenditure side, very clearly the switch of the quality of expenditure is very important. Subsidy management from 2.3, you can start piecemeal with a 1.9 to 2% of GDP, bringing down subsidy. As I said, there are plethora of welfare programs, half of them not monitored, not executed effectively, wasted. I think these are some of the rational steps that the government can take in this budget itself. So 4.1 is achievable, and I would think there would be two parts to this budget. Part A would be also keenly watched, because all that the President has outlined today should find some reflection in Part A of the speech. It's not that in 1 year the government envisages to achieve everything that has been laid down today.
Oh, absolutely.
But
this is a 5-year roadmap.
The tone has to be set, and some actionable has to be taken. Absolutely.
Right.
So some action steps will be watched by everyone. Is the government following it up with?
Vikas, let me bring you in on this conversation. The markets continue to be on that steroid bull run that we've seen today. You know, any stock related to the railways was up and running. Any stock related to infrastructure was up and running. Any stock related to real estate was up and running. What do you make of the kind of rally that we continue to see in the markets, and where do we go from here?
I think, Shereen, markets are hearing, after this election, what they've been wanting to hear for a long, long time. And I think there's a renewed hope which is building in terms of getting all the structural issue of India getting addressed. And I think if this government delivers even part of that, I think it will be a great thing for market. If you see structurally some of the issues, this government is talking about bringing down inflation, which is a big and sticky problem for Indian markets. This government is talking about improving the efficiency through various things, removing the supply side constraints, improving the infrastructure, building through agriculture growth, through manufacturing growth, through infrastructure building. So if you see supply side constraints are being removed, jobs are getting created, I think there is an all-round approach to revive the economic growth. And I think if all these things move forward, I think you will see growth coming into corporate earnings to various sectors which have not seen or which have been deprived of growth over last various years. You will see banking sector getting into sort of pink as the NPA reduces after these policy issues are resolved. So I think markets have been hearing what they've been wanting to hear for long, and I think this is just a beginning of a very, very big trend, according to me. It looks like that from all the right voices what we hear, government is going to deliver.
Yeah, but do you see, Vikas, do you see much more room as far as this rally is concerned, or do you really see that now we are going to see more consolidation and a range-bound move up until the budget, which could then be the next big catalyst or the next big trigger?
I do think that there could be a pre-budget rally, I think, in expectation of what it's going to be in the budget. And I think probably you might market rally before the budget, and I do think that markets are likely to consolidate around 8,000 levels of Nifty. This rally could be, either pre-budget or around budget. But I think till then you see a lot of steam there in the market, and maybe it will consolidate around that level. But I think short-term, tactically, you could look at this way, but structurally, I think markets are very well placed.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Bindeshwar Pathak of Sulabh International into this conversation. What was heartening to see is that something that Mr. Modi had spoken about during the election campaign was reflected in the President's speech, and that is the Swachh Bharat campaign, with the emphasis on waste management, on sanitation. Mr. Pathak, was that music to your ears?
Yeah. Hello?
So what do you... Yes, Mr. Pathak, we can hear you. What do you see as being the roadmap from here on as far as this business of waste management and sanitation is concerned?
This is for the first time in Indian budget, sanitation and waste management has given one of the topmost priorities. Never happened before. In the President's speech earlier, there was an oblique reference not about sanitation, only about water and health. So I say that this is the first time in the history of India after independence that this time Modi government has given one of the topmost priority of sanitation and waste management, which is need of the hour. Because in lack of sanitation, you spend huge money on health, People lose their mandates, they become sick, spend money on for the doctors and so on and so forth. And to keep the environment clean, so I think this is the best ever addressed budget by the President of India. And I think
if I were to ask you, Mr. Pathak, if I were to ask you to articulate for me the 3 or 4 things that you would now like the Modi government to take forward in terms of execution and in terms of delivering on this promise, what is it that you would like the government to do in terms of tangibles to execute and achieve this goal?
One is that to train young boys and girls as motivators, about 40,000 in India, to go house to house, motivate, inspire, and to see the toilet built in rural areas. And secondly, in the religious places, tourist places, and other places, the lack of sanitation and toilets. That is, I think, is the second one. And the third one is that to end the practice of manual scavenging, which was a dream of Mahatma Gandhi. I think these are 3 priorities Modi government may take, and I hope this will serve the purpose. And this will not only dream of Mahatma Gandhi is going to be fulfilled during this regime.
Well, they said that this is a tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. But Sunil Jain, let me come back to you on the basis of what we heard today in the President's speech. If I were to ask you to put your money on what we can now see as far as the budget is concerned, because that's going to be the next big trigger, and that will, in a sense, be a reality check as far as all of these promises are concerned. What would you put your money on? What are we likely to see in the budget on the basis of what we've heard so far?
Well, I mean, to be honest, firstly, I wouldn't pay much attention to the President's speech. I would wait for the budget. Now, we all know what we're looking for in the budget. We're looking for a change on the retrospective tax. Based on what we all heard, what Mr. Birla said, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think, investors, all these people who are putting in a lot of money in the markets, I think there's going to be a bit of a surprise or a shock to them. I don't see the retrospective tax happening. I think the reduction that we'll see in terms of subsidies will be somewhat limited, primarily, or perhaps the reason for that will be that this is a drought year. So in a drought year, we don't want to take chances with mucking around with the way the FCI works, or with the way the fertilizer subsidies and all that happen. So to be honest, I'm not looking at this budget making dramatically. I mean, I'm not looking at, for example, the deficit number coming down dramatically. I'm looking at this budget more in terms of the way the 1991 budget was. That we don't focus on the numbers. We focus really on what this government plans to do, with a bit more specific. So we would like to have a roadmap saying that we will cut subsidies to 1.5% of GDP, which is what it was in the Vajpayee years, in another 3 years. We want, somebody saying that we set up a panel which is going to be looking at retrospective taxes. And within X number of months the report will come out. We want a report which says
we already have a report. We have the Partha Shom report on retrospective
with
tax and GAR.
Or they could say we'll stick to Partha Shom. I want the budget to say that we're going to move from the MSP based system to a per acre kind of cash subsidy, which is what Mr. Chidambaram had announced a couple of years ago. So I think the budget has to be more of a 1991 type budget, outlining the big action areas in more detail.
Okay. Would you agree, Mr. Narayan, and is that what you expect as well, that it's going to, in a sense, lay out a specific roadmap of what this government intends to do? So the focus is going to be less on the minutiae but more on the vision.
I agree with Sunil. I think a roadmap is certainly going to be laid out, and roadmap in terms of actions to be taken. But I also think that there will be signals that the action is actually being taken. So I would say, for example, that there'd be an announcement that MSP will not be hiked. Okay, and that is fair enough, because I mean, if really you are going to have an average monsoon, there is no particular need, because if the crop area is going to be lesser, the amount of money that FCI is going to spend is going to be lesser this year. So I do think that there is an opportunity here to take some concrete steps which would announce that there is a fiscal consolidation on the way, not just a roadmap, but also actual steps.
Siddharth Birla, the specifics that you expect on the basis of what you've heard in the budget now.
Okay, roadmaps are good and they are essential, but I think we are way beyond just roadmaps. We need a very clear action plan in terms of hard numbers. I think on the 4.1%, as you said, if we can have a little room to maneuver and the 4.1 could go up, provided there's a very clear plan as to how plan expenditure will be brought back and how the money will be raised and how the money is being spent. If people see that clearly, I think both the domestic investors and the international community can live with slight room to maneuver on the 4.1% going up. Because if the economy grows, our revenues will grow in the next year, particularly with GST hopefully also coming in. The revenues will grow. So that should bridge the gap and bring it back to 4.1 in maybe a year from now. So this is what I expect, but I think I expect definitely more than roadmaps. We need hard numbers. We need to see what the arithmetic of this budget is. Yeah.
I agree. I think talk is cheap and they will have to deliver on some of these promises that they've made. But Vikas Khemani, so far, the monsoon concern has been shrugged off by the markets. Do you believe on the back of what we've seen today, and the government is also now talking about a contingency plan, putting that in place? We've heard from the government about the possibility of a serious rainfall deficiency, at least in parts of India. Do you believe now the monsoon threat and the monsoon fear will weigh on the market's mind?
Shereen, I do not think that would be a very big issue, given the fact that I think there are so many other positive things happening. And I think it is not a drought kind of situation. It is, right now expected to be a somewhat sort of minor
shortfall. Yeah.
So, and I think, so it's not going to be very, very devastating in that sense. So I think we have to be, worried about it. But I think the kind of positive which are right now happening on the other sectors of the economy, I think will kind of make it happen. And secondly, on the agriculture side also, they've talked about bringing productivity improvement and doing a lot in terms of how we can improve our yield and improve do another revolution in that. So I think, my opinion, markets will overlook. I don't think that is going to be a major cause of worry at this point in time.
All right, Shubhada Rao, Siddharth Birla, Sunil Jain, S. Narayan, Vikas Khemani and Bindeshwar Pathak, appreciate you joining us here to decode the President's address to the joint session of Parliament today, highlighting, articulating the roadmap that this government intends to follow as far as economic and political priorities are concerned. The next big trigger is going to be the union budget. How much of this and the other promises that the government has made will translate into reality in Arun Jaitley's maiden budget is the big question. But thank you very much for joining us. We'll leave you here. Goodbye.